Welcome to our monthly Charter School Investor Podcast, What Charter School Leadership Looks Like. Each month, we meet with leaders in the charter school sector to better understand how they land the plane while it's still being built. Our guest today, Lindsey Fuller. Lindsey's the Executive Director of the Teaching Well, formerly the Regional Director of School Services for Aspire Public Schools, and the daughter of two educators, and much more. Lindsey believes that when adults who lead and operate schools are healthy, emotionally regulated, and empowered, all children will thrive, and she works towards that every day. So welcome, Lindsey. This is a thrill having you with us.
It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Before we start, I just wanted to thank our sponsor this month, which is School Improvement Partnership, or SIP for short. We promote data transparency in the charter school sector. SIP reports on over $2 billion of charter school financings and meets the data transparency needs of the industry with its SIP database, with over 100 financial data points on every charter school borrower in 27 states. We actually have 93% of the 2024 audits already in the database. And of course, particularly this podcast, there'll be a link in Charter School Investor, which is our newsletter, which goes to 7,500 readers with a 35% open rate. So, Lindsey, tell us a little bit about your journey. I would say even, before, charter schools and supporting school leaders was part of your clear, unique destiny, but even early on, what sort of led you to perhaps education?
Yeah, I definitely thought I was going to be a lawyer. If you had asked me, I was very much resistant as the child of two educators to going that route. I was going to chart my own path. And when I was sick, I'd be sleeping under the desk in my mom's classroom. I was grading papers at night with my dad. I was tutoring and babysitting and working in preschools and summer camps. So it was always there, right? And I thought I would do something different. And then I started to take courses in college and just see the incredible disproportionate outcomes for children, that their zip codes truly determined their life trajectory. And, when I really paused and thought about some of the lessons that were instilled in me, especially by my dad, who was associated with the Black Panther Party, I was taught that education is the social justice movement of our lifetime, and that by any means necessary, we needed to leverage education as a tool for liberation. Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. And so that's where I landed teaching, and fast kind of progression occurred where I kept seeing larger challenges and then fighting to go solve those in good company.
Sure. Well, yeah, it's interesting you say that about your dad. So, is it unfair to say that you are the Black Panther of education?
Well, I cannot coin myself that. No one has ever said that. I identify as a Panther cub. So it is in my lineage, and it shapes much of my worldview. I'd say that there are a lot of misunderstandings about the Black Panther Party, but
Oh, yeah.
largely what they did, though, right, was try and create social programs for the liberation of all oppressed people. And certainly education was one of their top priorities. The freedom schools were incredible and wrapped around children and met every need of the family as well. And that inspired me to think of schools not as receptacles of broken people, but actually as kind of an opportunity to amplify the greatest gifts of a community and help them to achieve self-determination.
Self-determination. And I feel like a part of what's in there is an empowerment theme for, the whether it's the individual students, their families, maybe even the community writ large. And, not that top down, everyone's going to help you out, or you're not getting what you should get or whatever, although those things are also valuable and true. But, what can you create in the community that empowers, choices and growth? Or would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. That those most proximate to the challenge are exactly who we need to solve them. That actually we are creating the conditions and providing folks with the mindset, the skill set, but not the gifts. They already possess the gifts, the brilliance. It's already there. It's just really about removing barriers, and I think supporting them to from cradle to career to really see that they can liberate their own communities. Like that feels really central to me. And I watched as I was a child, a lot of the messaging was go to college, get out of your community. And that never sat well with me. I very early was like, actually, I'm going to college to return to my community. And so I invite that perspective, just home growing our own solutions.
Right. Well, and then it sounds like then when you returned, and I don't know if you returned to Oakland, when you started your school administration journey, how did that fit with what you were trying, with that vision?
Yeah, I mean, when I was a classroom teacher in North Oakland, I was teaching first grade, but I had many older students, and I noticed many of them were Black boys being sent to my room. And it was a K-8, right? So I had middle schoolers in my first grade room, and I'm like, well, pull out your book, get to work, and start to tutor this 6-year-old, right? Like there was a pervasive trend that Black boys were being sent out of class, right? And that their instructional minutes were being impacted due to behavior or perceived behavior challenges. And so that really got me thinking about what would the systems and policies and practices for educators to feel more effective serving Black male students. So I started a professional learning community. It was the largest at the time on Black male learning preferences. And I was trying to support my other colleagues with understanding some of the pedagogical skills that would be needed for children on the margins to be recentered. And but that really got me kind of fired up. And I was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go become an administrator. And I'm going to be the one that designs the systems, policies, and practices so that Black boys and Black girls and all children are able to succeed in their educational journey. Later, I'll tell you, I was supporting other schools, my peers. I was a kind of a peer coach, a lead assistant principal at the time. And I started to notice that at other schools, the same groups of kids were also being sent out. And that's eventually when I pursued a district role so I could support all of the schools. So I kept seeing the problem and I kept seeking the solution.
Yeah, in other situations, I've seen, the data and at School Improvement Partnership were about data transparency. So some schools, a lot of suspensions, expulsions, that to me was always a indicator that the issue you're talking about was present,
Mm-hmm.
because that really doesn't help anybody.
Oh,
Well, when you move to Aspire and managing student services for their 11 charter schools with that CMO in California, how did these lessons and this direction from early in your career, how did it help you?
hmm. Yeah. Well, first, I didn't do it alone. The change that we made, I had incredible teams. The culture squad were deans and assistant principals. The circle gang, as we called them, were the mental health clinicians. There were phenomenal principals. And what I'd say is that the leaders at Aspire during the time I was there just really wanted to collaborate. And there was kind of an ego death where it was like, we are open to coaching and feedback, and we can kind of piece together the solution as a collective. So having access to principal communities of practice where they convened monthly, and then quarterly step backs where the regional team would meet and analyze data. You talk about data, accountability, transparency, and then we'd go meet with school leadership teams and say, okay, how are you doing relative to your last goals? And how do we need to further tailor our supports to you? So kind of an MTSS or multi-tiered support, right, for school educators and leaders was really catalytic in terms of establishing systems that resulted in more student success.
Interesting. Well, that's a sort of a, anyway, it's not a unique concept to you, but in my experience with not as much on the teacher side, I don't have that. So what would an instance of an individual teacher's growth, without getting into names, how would this work? I hear the monthly and the quarterly meetings and all that, and maybe an improvement plan, just like you do for a school that's struggling. But maybe I think sometimes it can be difficult, at least for me, Alan, it's sometimes difficult to learn and grow. Sometimes we call it uh, sort of doubling down on the existing, plan and just doing it more or harder. That's a pickle for me that I probably, had I been exposed to you earlier, I'd do a little better at. So for those stubborn teachers like me, how did you move them forward?
Well, first of all, I think there was just so much talent. Aspire really was recruiting in incredible folks. And I do think that one of the best recruitment and rigor strategies that a CMO or a traditional school district can have is strong hiring and onboarding. Like, get the right people in the room and you can make wonders possible. But I will also say that in the education field, we're very clear that differentiation is needed, that not every child requires the same type of instruction, the same type of support, the same type of accountability. And yet we very seldom afford that same differentiation perspective to the adults in the school or in the district. And for me, it just boils down that simply. If I am an excellent teacher, then I want that to translate to an excellent adult coach. And to me, when we were meeting and looking at data and saying, wow, okay, this second grade team for the last 3 years actually is not progressing in terms of early literacy. What is the do different for them? It might be creating more internalization practice, but what's the do different for their leaders and coaches on site? And what's the do different for the district team, right? Because if we do the same thing, we're going to get the same results. So how do we innovate sustainably with a whole person lens, right? They're also feeling vulnerable with their data. We don't need to kick people while they're down. How do we co-regulate with them as they experience their data and then really tailor our coaching to honor their professional growth? It's what they deserve and it's what our kids need.
Interesting. Well, and sort of now you're explaining sort of some of the thinking behind you starting the Teaching Well.
Well, I didn't start it. I'm not the founder. I'm the second wave leader, but I'm grateful to be here. And but you're right. The ethos of me coming to the Teaching Well was my personal burnout. So there's that. I don't think I would have named it as burnout at the time, but I most certainly was. But the other piece was I've been hitting my head against the walls, a decade of serving the most marginalized children. And what I experienced was that the system framed people as disposable. Not a given system, but the system nationally. Often you hear things like, well, your systems are only as good, your systems weren't great if someone leaves and they fall apart. But what we're missing in that is that to actually achieve continuity of care for youth, it requires retaining the most valuable asset, which is our talent, right? It reduces stress and burnout. It creates more sustainability. I'll talk later about this, I'm sure, but protecting institutional knowledge and the huge investment we make into training staff. But it lets us go from good to great and not restart every 3 to 5 years because we're hemorrhaging people. And that is what propelled me towards focusing on the adults. I said, maybe I should try this. Maybe this is actually how we'll stabilize things for kids if we can keep adults in the building, and the right ones, to be clear.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, I want to talk about your leadership style, if you will, but first, I wanted to just do a quick break. And mention our sponsor, School Improvement Partnership, which promotes data transparency in the charter school sector. The data that we collect on 93% of the charter schools in 27 states includes operating academic metrics, of course, as well as financial metrics on every charter school borrower in the country. And of course, our Charter School Investor biweekly newsletter. So it looks like you, in terms of leadership, and this is not as much your leadership as the leaders you run into when whether it's the Teaching Well or you are working with school leaders, potentially even district leaders. How do they know they're potentially in trouble with burnout, or issues that will be too late? I guess, is it teacher turnover, which we're already starting to see? That's sort of one certainly indicator, but I'm sure there are others.
Yeah. I mean, one of the key prerequisites for partnering with a school or a CMO is leader readiness. And that doesn't mean that they are an expert. It means that they are open to support, that they value their people, and they're open to change. So, I could talk a little bit more about how we might pull or invite a charter school leader towards a partnership. But I think, to your question, how do we know? What are some of the look fors, right? There's self and collective awareness needed. So the signs can look different, but some of the signs we see most regularly are chronic fatigue and illness, right? So a leader that is perpetually sick, or a teaching team that's always sick or injured, right? We also see things like an increase in conflict amongst adults and less effective collaboration. We see high levels of exclusionary discipline, so referrals, suspensions, expulsions. And in fact, we see adult chronic absenteeism. Everyone wants to talk about children not coming to school, but we see a persistent trend of adult chronic absenteeism and tardiness when there's burnout. Anything from low self-esteem, motivation, folks aren't sleeping or they're oversleeping. I mean, I could keep going. I could keep going
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, help me with this, because it's an area I always, wonder about and potentially struggle with myself. Is there ever an issue with leaders and their teams on being able to draw the line between support and compassion for their students, particularly because certainly with COVID and certainly beyond, I think brighter light was shined on social emotional challenges and challenges at home that students have. Probably they've always been there, but I think people noticed them now because for whatever reason, and it did everything from impair learning to other things. So is that an issue, or is that just part about being a leader and a teacher, is knowing where to draw that line?
Well, it's tricky, right? Because society and our school districts literally reward people for passing their personal boundaries or wellness in service of child achievement. So I want to say that, right? You are literally celebrated, recognized, promoted often for the results. And the results in this field are not accompanied by adequate prep and planning time, rigorous, consistent coaching and support. There are a lot of misconceptions in our culture about, well, teachers only work for 10 months. Well, they have all these breaks, right? The toll physically, mentally, and emotionally of this work is very different. So someone who can log out of their spreadsheet and not worry about it at night is very different than someone who sits in front of 27 students and feels the weight of wrapping around them. And so, do I believe that educators need to work on boundaries? Yes, at the Teaching Well, we have curriculum that supports balanced boundaries, right? Because we also see educators who are hyper boundaried at times. And then that is accompanied often by tenure, privilege, more socioeconomic status, right? And so we have new green teachers, many of them of color, that aren't afforded those same opportunities. So we want balanced boundaries, making sure that both the self and the collective can thrive. But I don't think it's as simple as saying educators struggle with boundaries, therefore they're burnt out. I think it's very nuanced, right? The workload isn't sustainable by design.
Right. Right. Well, I'd also be curious in the BIPOC community near you as it relates to education. Um, has there been a change or just simply an awareness of other elements in there that are making it more difficult for leaders of color to succeed? And uh, what are the what are you starting to see or you have seen for quite some time, perhaps?
Yeah, I really appreciate this question. And just thinking about, right, folks who historically have been on the margins. So if you don't know what BIPOC means, Black, Indigenous, people of color. But one of the clear trends that we're seeing, and this isn't brand new, right? But it's intensifying certainly, is this concept of voting with their feet. And so if we were to look, for example, at the Oakland landscape, we see many families, in particular Black families, just simply do not trust the education system with keeping their young ones safe, learning in rigorous environments, and the consistency needed to move beyond survival and towards thriving. There's a historical mistrust for many of these communities from an education system that has perpetuated many harms. And so now they're asking us if they can trust us with their most precious treasures, right? Their kids. And so that's a trend that I'm noticing. That's really fascinating. And I believe in the promise of public education. And I've also been humbled time and time again that not every child needs the same thing. And that I believe parents want what's best for their kids and will stop at no end to find a learning environment that feels nurturing and supportive, right? Because we're co-parenting. That's what I used to tell people when I was an administrator and even as a teacher. I would do home schools and I would actually ask for consent to co-parent. I have your kids just as much as you do. I see them more during the week than you do. Can we be in this relationship together? And so I take it very seriously to be entrusted with people's children under my care. And for that reason, I believe that many of the BIPOC communities are watching and determining who they can trust with their children.
And what you also find, and this is sort of one of the strengths of the charter school movement nationally, is with respect to students who, for example, free and reduced lunch students or economically disadvantaged students, that standard academic growth at charter schools nationally outpaces the traditional district schools. And that is exactly why more and more families have found charters to be that home, for them. And I think they all want to do that, and it's just a matter of finding the right place. And anything can break down per district, but I think that's been the national trend we've seen, and it's no surprise because those schools are a little bit more nimble, not only in the ability to deal with COVID, but deal with unique learning styles and make it so that they can find students where they are and move them forward.
But
Um,
I'll say one thing I want to say that's really interesting here. I mean, first of all, the teaching was model agnostic. So I make that very clear. We work
oh
across
yeah,
school lines. But I say that to say we work with incredible traditional schools. We work with incredible charter schools. We even have a couple of independent schools that we partner with that are incredible. I think we can have awesome learning environments in each of the models, and we can also have really terrible ones. And it's my prayer, like moving forward, I really try and position us at the teaching well as bridge builders because all of us want the same thing, but we're so divided in this field. Things have become so politicized that I actually think kids are losing out and educators are losing out. And so I hear you and I believe in the nimbleness. It's why I dedicated a decade of my life to serve in charters. I believe in the flexibility. I believe in tailoring to the community. And there's something really special about creating small schools um, that have less barriers to innovating in ways that meet the unique population in front of them. So I'm all here for it. I'm here for good schools. But one thing I will say, and I know you value transparency and accountability with data. Now later you're going to ask me this, but I just got to tell you one concerning trend I am seeing is a shift away from honest data metrics. And this is something for all of the folks who partner with you who want to finance schools. to really an area that they need to be digging in deeply is around exclusionary discipline. There is so much pressure for schools to have zero to very few suspensions and expulsions that folks are pressured out of telling the truth. And it is a huge burden for me. It puts a fire in my
Oh,
belly because I'm working with schools across the country and they're like, we have zero suspensions. But I'm on their site working with their educators, watching how many children are sent home. If you call a parent and disrupt their work schedule to pull a child out during instructional minutes, you most certainly are suspending them.
mm.
That is what that is. It is the legal
Oh,
mandate.
absolutely. Yeah,
And
no, yeah,
I'm watching as
yeah.
that pressure, and that's across traditional and charters. I'm watching as our hyper focus on low numbers has us manipulating data in ways that don't actually let us see the challenges and support the child to replace the maladaptive behaviors. So talk about data accountability. We need you to expand into exclusionary discipline data accountability, please, Alan and team, and get that picture accurate, because that's how we actually tailor supports to
Right.
help kids and teachers. And we're increasingly hearing educators say, you talk about COVID, what has changed post COVID, right? Yes, we have seen some of the learning loss,
Oh,
right,
yeah.
regained. And I know you feel really strongly about this. And I definitely see examples of that, but not necessarily when we look at the whole child. So behavioral and mental health is as impacted as ever and is worsening. We have a teen mental health crisis happening, and it's actually
I
starting
see.
much younger. And so I think that we need more data transparency and support around whole child needs. And I've also say that the adults haven't necessarily recovered from COVID.
Right. Well, just naively now. So, because academic and test scores nationally have recovered from COVID, not necessarily to pre-2020 levels, but darn close. But you're really arguing that that rather than, English, reading and science in eighth grade and those tests, that there needs to be, are you saying some sort of metric on social emotional health of students that needs to, sort of when you talk about data transparency, is that what you're thinking, or am I missing that as a piece of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, first I'll say with the academic piece, I think we have a lot of questions to ask, because if we have folks returning, if a school is returning to its pre-pandemic data, that's awesome. Everyone's like celebrating the recovery. And I'm here with that. However, if only a third of children are reading on grade level and they're just returning to that, that's still inadequate. And so I think there's
Fair
nuance to
enough.
data.
Yeah.
And I would say, yes, I do believe we need better socio-emotional mental health and behavioral screeners data, and universal tiered interventions for children. We are hearing consistently that student behavior and mental health is a part of what is making teaching very challenging today. And I don't want to sugarcoat that. I say that with caution because I never want someone to hear me say that and blame children. But I say that teaching today is very different. My mom taught for 42 years, 29 of those years in the same classroom.
Wow.
And when she goes in to volunteer in classrooms today, because of course, once a teacher, always a teacher, she's like, I didn't have to deal with half of the behavior and mental health and socio-emotional challenges that these teachers are today. Like our retired teaching force can tell you things have changed. And I tell this to folks all the time. When I was a child and the school called home, parents said, what did you do to their kids? And now when schools call home about a child's behavior, often the family's reaction is, and what did you do to my child, to the educators? And so I think that, again, from a bridge building standpoint, we have a long way to go in terms of having families and educators be able to act as one team in support of young people.
Yeah, that's a bigger question because I think what, I, when you say that, it makes me realize that families and communities have changed over the 40 years since your mom started teaching. So as a
Mm-hmm.
result, the student that walks in with a different background and a different perspective than you walked in or I walked in when we used to walk in. So,
That's exactly
and
right.
yeah, and I think, police, teachers, first responders, anybody who's on that front line, they're the ones who get this right in the teeth and
Oh
they're
yeah.
left to deal with it. And then
Hmm.
we quibble about how well they did on it. Gosh, I
Exactly.
can't believe
Exactly.
you did that. Some of whom are not, without your organization and others, particularly, trained for the moment. It'd be one thing to be the best, sharpshooter on the police, team, but that doesn't make you perfect to deal with, a rumble at the middle school playground. And
Right.
and through no fault. I mean, I'm not sure I could either. So it's about, just like with your organization, about giving people the tools so they can learn and grow with this. It sounds like a very shifting, responsibility.
That's right. And I think that the political landscape is really tough. But I also can't say enough how much things have changed and how little I believe broader society is like up to date on what it is. If I could wave a wand and, similar to jury duty, have every community member take on a recess supervision, of course the safe ones, it's got to be a screening, so come on, asterisks, everybody stay with me here, do a supervision in a cafeteria or playground, or do a substitute teaching position, I think we would regard teachers, we would accelerate a re-dignifying of the profession quite quickly. Because whether it's declining enrollment, decrease in birth rate, gentrification, newcomers, an increase in mod severe special needs, I mean, the student population in schools is changing so rapidly. And yet we are resourcing them at similar rates. We need to really think about how we are providing support to educators, to school administrators, and to district leaders. There's a paradigm shift required if we're going to actually meet the moment.
Right. I mean, again, I don't have your background in student support, but I often, I've heard somebody say that every student needs an IEP.
Mm.
That, in other words, we all learn differently, have different strengths, have different triggers, things we struggle with. Some that react on the outskirts that'll get you a special education designation. But in fairness, don't we all at certain moments? And I'd say public education writ large, as you referred to earlier, has sort of flipped the classroom, made it more that the students are the teachers and the teachers are students, and there's more to gain there. Um, and making students and teachers realize that if they're bad at something, welcome to the party. I mean, who
Yeah,
isn't? And
that's
it's
right.
about learning how to grow in that area.
That's right. That's right. And I think that, I tell folks often, we wouldn't punish a child for getting a math problem wrong. So when they talk out of turn, why do we send them out of the room? It's the same concept for me with a teacher, where we need to actually provide them with differentiated training and coaching based on their learning preference and needs. And that should be something that's afforded for their career. And we should be financing and resourcing schools accordingly, because every year they have a whole new host of kids that's going to test them and push them and cause them to go back to the classroom, right? Teachers are forever learners. And I'm on a big mission to re-professionalize, re-dignify the profession.
Yes, and with a great return for uh, the students, the families and the community, rather than dealing with the new teacher each year. Well, I want to see if I could bring our discussion to a close, and I have one quote that I love from a favorite author of mine, Abraham Verghese, his book Cutting for Stone. He writes, "You live life forward, but understand it backward." What is it you understand now as a leader that you wished you knew sooner?
Yeah. Well, overall, I wish that little leader Lindsey, knew that this is a marathon and not a sprint. And so, all of the cliche, you can't pour from an empty cup or put your own oxygen mask on first, they're all true. Somebody's granny taught that to us, and we need to follow that advice, right? But that to show up for kids means to value and support the educators who serve them each day. That's the high level. I would say if I were to dial it down, I would also say that many of the initiatives that I was fighting for kids, I wish I had also advocated for adults in schools, if I could do it again. So now when I fight for financing and resourcing and investing in children's socio-emotional learning programs, I'm saying, and the teachers need it too. When I'm fighting for mental health therapy for students, I'm saying, and it should be in the benefits of educators as well. So really thinking about the entire ecosystem more comprehensively. I was so students first, Alan,
Yes,
and now I understand that to truly care about children, you have to tend to the adults as well.
sure. It's just a bigger, circle that supports, and it may even, if the Black Panthers were right, relate to the community as well, and creating those supports there. So,
Absolutely.
um, well, Lindsey, a big thank you to you. Thank you for being so open and willing to let us learn from your journey, which has been extraordinary. And thank you to our sponsor once again, School Improvement Partnership.